One of the officers studied it, nodding slightly. The tension in the air thickened. The little girl, sensing the weight of the moment, spoke up again. "Why do they think you're not my daddy?" Her voice was small, confused. "You always pick me up from school. You make my lunch. You tuck me in at night." The father swallowed hard, feeling the sting of the moment. He had spent years raising his daughter, loving her, protecting her, only to have a stranger question his place in her life in an instant. The officers exchanged glances again, as if realizing the situation wasn't what they had assumed. But before anyone could speak, the woman who had called the police suddenly stepped back, her face pale. She had just noticed something that made her regret everything. The woman's face drained of color as she stared at the father's phone screen. Her eyes darted between the school enrollment form and the little girl, as if piecing something together. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her expression. I think I've made a mistake," she mumbled, her voice barely above a whisper. But before anyone could react, one of the officers' radios crackled to life. "Be advised, we just received a report of a missing child matching the description. White female, approximately 6 years old." The tension snapped back like a rubber band. The woman gasped, her doubt shifting into something else. Vindication. "See, I knew something was wrong," she blurted out, stepping closer. "That must be her. I told you something didn't add up." The father's eyes widened in shock. "What? That's impossible. My daughter isn't missing. She's right here with me." His voice was steady, but there was an edge of disbelief. One of the officers held up a hand. "Sir, we need to confirm this." He turned to his partner. "Get a description from dispatch." The little girl clung tighter to her father's hand, her face full of confusion and fear. "Daddy, what's happening?" The watching crowd murmured, their curiosity turning into unease. The woman who had called the police now stood with her arms crossed, her confidence returning. "I knew it," she muttered under her breath. The father shook his head. "This is ridiculous. My daughter isn't missing. She's my child." But then the officer's radio crackled again. "Update on the missing child. Name is Emily Parker. Last seen wearing a pink sweater and blue jeans." The father's breath caught in his throat. His daughter was wearing the exact same outfit. A heavy silence fell over the scene. Then an officer stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "Sir, we need to ask you to come with us." The father's heart pounded as he looked down at his daughter. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice tight. "Her name is Olivia. She's my daughter." But the officers hesitated. The description was too close. The woman who had called the police smirked, convinced she had been right all along. Then, from behind the crowd, another voice cut through the tension. "Wait, that's not Emily." A frantic-looking woman pushed forward, her face filled with desperation. "Emily is my daughter. She was just found 2 streets over. She's safe." The officers' radios crackled again. "Missing child has been located. False alarm." A stunned silence followed. The woman who had accused the father turned pale again, realizing her mistake had gone even further than she thought. The officers relaxed, exhaling sharply. The father let out a breath he didn't even realize he was holding. But before he could speak, his daughter pulled on his sleeve and pointed at the woman. "Daddy, why did she say I wasn't yours?" Her voice was small, but the impact was huge. It started as a peaceful afternoon at the park, just a father and his daughter enjoying their time together. Laughter filled the air as they played, completely unaware that someone was watching. Then, out of nowhere, a woman approached, her face tense with suspicion. She glanced at the little girl, then at her father, and within seconds, she was on the phone with the police. She was convinced something was wrong. Why was a black man with a white child? Was the girl in danger? Without hesitation, she made the call, sure she was doing the right thing. But what happened next was something she never expected. As the officers arrived, the situation took an unexpected turn. The truth that came out not only shocked her, but also left her regretting everything. Stay tuned to find out how this misunderstanding unraveled and why she would never see things the same way again. The father, confused but calm, watched as the officers approached. His daughter, still holding his hand, looked up at him with innocent eyes, unaware of the storm brewing around them. The woman who had called the police stood nearby, arms crossed, convinced she had done the right thing. One officer stepped forward, his expression serious. "Sir, can we speak with you for a moment?" The father nodded, his voice steady. "Of course, what's going on?" Before they could answer, the woman chimed in. "I saw him with that little girl. She doesn't look like she belongs to him. I was just trying to make sure she's safe." The father exhaled slowly, glancing down at his daughter, who squeezed his hand tighter. The officers exchanged glances, sensing the tension. Something felt off about this whole situation. But before they could say anything, the little girl spoke up, and what she said changed everything. The little girl looked up at the officers, her voice small but firm. "This is my dad," she said, her eyes flickering with confusion. "Why are you asking him questions?" The woman scoffed, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, are you sure? Maybe you're just scared to say something." The father's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Ma'am, I don't know what you think is happening here, but this is my daughter." He reached into his pocket, slowly and carefully, pulling out his wallet. "I have pictures. I have proof." One officer took the wallet and flipped through the photos. Birthday parties, vacations, school events. Clear as day, the little girl was right there beside her father in every picture. The officer's posture shifted slightly, but the woman wasn't convinced. "Anyone can carry pictures," she muttered. "How do we know for sure?" The officers hesitated. The air was thick with tension, and the father could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had been through situations like this before, too many times. But this time, something felt different. The woman wasn't just mistaken, she was determined to believe the worst. The little girl tugged on her dad's sleeve. "Daddy, can we go home now?" Her voice wavered, but she stood tall beside him. One of the officers sighed, turning to the woman. "Ma'am, do you have any real reason to believe this child is in danger?" The woman's confidence wavered for the first time. She looked at the little girl, then back at the father. But before she could answer, another voice cut through the tension. Someone had been watching the whole thing unfold, and they weren't about to stay silent. A woman nearby, who had been silently watching the whole time, finally stepped forward. She had seen enough. "Excuse me," she said firmly, looking directly at the officers. "I was here when they arrived." That little girl ran straight to her dad, laughing and holding his hand. There was no struggle, no hesitation, just a father and his daughter enjoying their day. The woman who made the call shifted uncomfortably. I was just being cautious," she stammered, but her voice wasn't as sure as before. The officers turned back to the father. One of them cleared his throat. "Sir, do you have any additional ID? Something that connects you to your daughter?" The father took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket again, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his emails and pulled up a document, his daughter's school enrollment form, listing him as her parent. He held it out. "This is more proof," he said, his voice calm but firm. He took a step forward again, but before he could say another word, a voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" A second man had stepped up from the side of the bus stop. He was younger, dressed casually, but there was something familiar in the way he carried himself, calm, observant. His eyes met the Marine's for just a second, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. This wasn't just any bystander. This was another Marine, and now everything had changed. The first bully stiffened at the sound of the new voice. He turned, sizing up the man who had stepped forward. "Who's asking?" he muttered, trying to sound tough, but there was hesitation in his voice now. The younger man didn't flinch. He simply crossed his arms and glanced at the Marine before looking back at the group. "No problem," the Marine said evenly, his gaze steady. "Just a lesson in patience." The bullies exchanged glances. Something was off. The way these two men acknowledged each other, the quiet confidence between them, it wasn't normal. The second man wasn't just some random stranger. He knew exactly who he was standing beside. Then the bus finally pulled up, its brakes hissing as the doors swung open. The Marine stepped forward, adjusting his jacket. The second man followed, pausing just long enough to glance at the group one last time. He didn't